Today we are looking at section 8.7. It's all about circles. We're going to look at two things having to do with circles, circumference and area. Circumference is a lot like the idea of perimeter. It's the distance around the outside. And then area is the same idea, area we've been talking about. Basically, you're going to learn two formulas, one for each, and then we're going to practice using them. These notes shouldn't take too long. There are 6 examples. Again, our objective is just to talk about circles as far as circumference and area. Alright, so the first definition is just to define what a circle is. A circle is a set of all points in a plane that are the same distance from the given point called the center. So if you're looking at the circle up here on the right, imagine if I put like a pencil right here and attached a string to it. The string would be the length of the radius, and then if you draw all the way around, that would form a circle. So every single point on the circle is that same distance from the center. And we call that distance the radius. The radius is the distance from the center to a point on the circle. If you take the radius and extend it all the way to the other side, you would have twice the length of the radius, and we call that the diameter. So the radius just goes from the center to the circle. Diameter goes from one side to the other side, and it goes through the center. Any questions so far? We'll take a second and draw this circle after we get all the definitions down. So if you're having a hard time reading that, you can just wait on that. If you've got it down already, go for it. We've got circumference. Remember I said circumference is kind of like perimeter. Same idea, it's just the distance around a figure. And then these two we're not going to talk a lot about today, but they are helpful to know when you're talking about circles. So a central angle is an angle whose vertex is the center of a circle. So if you have a circle, here's your center. If you have an angle like that, that's called a central angle. And then a sector is the region that it makes. So if you want to like shade that in, that would be a sector. Again, your book covers it. It is some problems that will come up on your homework. I'm going to let you skip them. I really want to hit circumference and area hard and not so much sectors. But that's the definition of a sector if you ever see it in the future. Any questions so far? All right, let's go ahead and draw that diagram that was kind of hard to read. So let me get something going here. So if you already drew it, that's fine. But I'll draw it a little bigger. So this is the center. If you go right to the edge, that's the radius. Hold on one second. If you go through, that's called the diameter. And then the distance around. So like if I start here and I measure all the way around, that's the circumference. And I don't know if I know how to spell. Friends? Question mark? Let me double check that spelling, get back to you. Circumference. Oh! Nailed it! Alright, so that's what the diagram... Yeah, that's what the diagram earlier was kind of hard to read. It was very small up in the upper right-hand corner. That's a little bolder, easier to read diagram. So I would definitely get that in your notes. So you need to write down just this formula at the very top. So write down circumference of a circle. There's actually 2 ways to find the circumference depending on what you're given. You can either do pi times the diameter. So if they give you the distance all the way across the circle, you just multiply that number by pi. More typically, though, they'll give you a radius, and then you multiply it by 2, and you multiply it by pi. That's how we find the circumference. So there's an example down here. After you write the formula, check this one out. So if you want to find the circumference of this circle right here, You just do 2 pi times the radius. Since they gave us only half of the distance across the circle, we use the formula 2 pi r. So 2 pi r, you can just type it in the calculator. There is a pi button on the calculator. If you're using a 4-function calculator or like your iPhone turned upright, there isn't a pi button. If you're using one without a pi button, we do 3.14. That's why we celebrated it on March 14th. So 3.14 is the approximation for pi. So either way, just multiply those 3 values if you have the radius. If you're given the diameter, just multiply it by pi, and that is your circumference. We will round to 2 decimal places in this class, the nearest hundredth. So be aware of that. Any questions on circumference? So if I'm given the radius, I'm going to use this one with the r. If I'm given the diameter, I'm going to use this one with the d. All right? So number 1, am I given the radius or the diameter? The radius, so I'm going to use this one. So I'm going to do 2 times pi times 2. Type it right into the calculator. 2 times pi. Pi is sort of like diagonal with a 7. It's like diagonal 2 buttons up. Pi and 2. 12.5. Let's round that. There's a 6 after the 6, so it goes up to a 7. We are rounding 2 numbers after the decimal. 12.57 inches.
2 times pi times the radius.
All right, number 2. Am I given the radius or the diameter?
I didn't heard what you said.
Radius or diameter? Radius. So again, I'm going to use this formula.
How do you know if it's
2 times the pi times 11. The diameter is like this when it goes all the way across. The radius only goes halfway, which the radius, to get from radius to diameter, you multiply by 2, so that's where this 2 comes in. Type this in. 2 times pi times 11.
69 point.
I got 69.2 because that 8 is
0.1.
Yeah.
You don't look all the way to the end. You do the first 2 numbers. So it looks like this, right? And then there's a bunch of stuff after it. Hold on, I'll come look at yours in a second. Does the 5 make the 1 go up or stay the same?
Stay the same.
That go up. This is the only number you're concerned with. You're not concerned with the 8 all the way at the end of the calculator. Just the number right after the second number.
6908.
Hold on 1 second. Are we given the radius or the diameter on the last one? The diameter. If you're given the diameter, it's the same thing without the 2 in the front. So now it's just pi times 28. It is 87.96 with a 4 after it. 4 does not make a 6 go up, so we're going to keep that the same. Raise your hand if you have questions on circumference. Here's the formula for area. So area equals pi times the radius squared. You have to have the radius here. There is no version of this that works with diameter. So if you're given the diameter, you just have to divide it by 2 to find the radius and then plug it in here. So you can see we found the area of this circle over here. So 6 was the radius. So pi times 6 squared. The calculator knows the order of operations. It will do it for you if you type it in correctly. If you have a calculator that doesn't have a pi button, you can use 3.14. And there you go. I don't think we'll be getting any whole numbers. I think just since they use the approximation on this example, ours will probably all have decimals today. All right, so here are the 3 examples. This first one is 17, and it is a radius. The next one says 5, and it also just goes to the center of the circle. And then back here it goes all the way across, and it's a 2. We are looking for area now. You can tell by the directions which one you're looking for, area or circumference. Area equals pi r squared. So on number 4, my radius is 17. So I'm going to do pi times 17 squared. When I type that into my calculator, I can either do 17 times pi, or you can just type it right in like that, pi times 17, and then the squared button. The squared button is right next to the 7 if you're using one of my calculators. I am coming up with 907.920. 0 makes the 2 stay the same. We are talking about area now, so when you write the units, you put a little squared after it. Raise your hand if you have any questions. If you don't have any questions, please don't talk. All right, same thing on the next one. I am going to do pi times 5 squared. So you can do 5 times 5 times pi, or you can do pi times 5 squared, or you can do 5 squared times pi, however you want to type it in. Remember, in multiplication, order doesn't really matter, so however you feel like typing it, go for it. Anyone have the answer for me? I gave away the first 2 digits.
I got like 78.53.
539. So what do you do?
4.
Yeah, so 5, 4. And we're talking about centimeters. So centimeters squared. All right, now the last one is a little trickier. What's the problem here on number 6? This is the diameter. How do I find the radius if I'm given the divided by how many? 2. Yeah, so what's the radius on this one? 1. Very good. And now you use that same formula. So area equals pi times 1 squared. So basically just pi, right? Are you guys coming up with 3.14?
Yep.
I sure hope so. Because pi times 1 is just pi. All right, that is our lesson for today. Raise your hand if you have any questions.